Okay, to introduce tonight's speaker, Alexis Collado is a designer, podcaster, career coach, and community builder. He's currently the co founder and chief design officer at Swarm, helping connect founders to talented fractional professionals. He was involved in building things like the Roots podcast, UX Society, and the UX Plus conference. Let me hand over the mic to Alexis. Alexis, the floor is now yours.
Okay, thank you for giving me the floor, Jake. uh, hey everyone, so welcome to my talk. I'll be sharing my story on how I became a startup co-founder, starting from being a student club leader. So is everyone ready? Can you type ready on the chat if you're actually listening? I don't like it when no one's listening. Okay, cool. And it's weird to talk when I just see myself on the camera. But okay, let's start. Looks like there are some people here. Okay, so I want to start with my story as a student. So in my opinion, to get to where I am now, when I was a student, what I really did was to capitalize on my passion. Graduating high school, I was always into web design. Um, One of our community members from Swarm, Philip, he actually taught me how to do web design and steal WordPress templates and use those on our for WordPress sites in school. Um, and I did just that. But what's more important during my experience at school was that I built on top of this passion. So in school, this was me back in 2014, almost like a decade ago. um I found my tribe, people who were also who loved web design, or people who I can convince to join me in learning design and like user experience. So those are these people. Some of them are in the audience. Avery. and Pogi daw. Okay. This is Avery, the one on the leftmost. Okay. So we did a couple of stuff, but it, what translates as passion is that you have intensity in what you do. So relatively during that time, like a few years ago, 7 to 8 years ago, people didn't really know what user experience was or wasn't into product design. And one unfair advantage I had as a designer was that I like talking to people and getting to know people. And then uh, by virtue of that, I invited a lot of them to come talk for us. So that started the initial interest in user experience in our community. So yeah, thanks to these people for spurring that interest. And we grew our club. We invited very prominent people. There are, I think, majority of your Filipinos here. We invited someone who started their career at like a very successful start, like joining an FMCG, like PNG, and then she went abroad to study human computer interaction and uh, did her master's, and she became a Google UX designer. And then I was like, oh, I want that to be my pathway in the future. But look where I am now. uh, we're still here. We did a lot of events and sharing what we learned with the community, and that as a student kind of forces you to uh, kind of make sure what you're sharing is legit, because like you're accountable to the community that you're part of, so you can't teach them just random stuff, right? So that meant that for us, for me, and for our board of student leaders, we had to constantly understand what user experience is, what was designed, and apply it ourselves. Okay, and some of the things I did as a student leader, like student, was take a lot of internships. So I studied UX so much that I landed a internship at an international online travel agency, Agoda. So you probably don't like it because it's a lot of like colors and random psychological tricks and deals. But it's a legit organization. It's like there are like 50 plus designers there, and that was my first time like really seeing, oh, okay, so design can operate at this scale and can be this important to a company. And I built my skills from there. So this was my I guess team. And when you join as an intern at an international company, like you're gonna work on really, really small stuff. Like some weird stuff will be like given to you, like, okay, I worked on this weather widget. Nice. Or like you're gonna be assigned to do some competitive analysis. Okay, what's the best practice here? Um, those kinds of things. But what I really liked here is I got exposed to different cultures and like a high level of taste for design. And I would also recognize that I am quite privileged. Uh, as a student, one of the earliest signs that I manifested my love for startups was that I did pitch like a startup in Silicon Valley as part of a program in ACES. So that's ACES Stanford, Asia Pacific Student Entrepreneurship Society. So it's kind of like the club I built, UX Society, but it's just for, for startups. Um, Conventionally, students really follow the lead of people who created the structures for them in university. So what's an example of that? People follow what their teachers say or what the conventional structure is in, let's say, an organization, student organization. But since I started my own club with other people, like there was no like institutional knowledge to take advantage of. So I had to create that myself along with other people. And the way I did that was I participated a lot in professional meetups. I got to know a lot of people teaching me, and that helped me update my mental model of like, okay, so what is UX? What is design? How do you do these methods? How do you apply them in different contexts? And I brought whatever I learned back to the club. And when I was in third year, I was literally part of a panel discussion on like in the UX Philippines conference. I see Kate here. I think she's part of UXPH now. So I I was very very passionate about design. I had the luxury to travel and just go to like conferences that involve user experience. At that time, there was a lot. So I met one of the authors of like one of the prominent UX books. This is Jesse James Garrett. So this was like UX in the 1980s or 1990s. Um, so just exposing myself to a lot of information as much as possible, just because when you're learning design, user experience, product, those kinds of things, there are a lot of competing information, and especially in the age of social media, you'll be exposed to random influencers that don't really know what they're talking about. It's like high frequency, low like quality information, and then if you base your career growth on that, it's potentially dangerous. So what I love doing as a student was I read up a lot, like long form articles, books, and I went straight to the source itself. And of course, we share a little bit of those knowledge with the community. It's like a random recruitment poster we created before, and then we graduated. Um, and yeah, I got featured in our grad magazine for my efforts, and I did my best to essentially share or help the next set of people taking on the leadership role at User Experience Society. So a lot of these people actually did pursue a career in design, even if they're not part of our board or whatever, like board of leaders. Like there's literally people in San Francisco right now being like a product designer. So okay, so that's Act 1. So Act 2 is revolve it revolves around my experience being an actual professional. So I was so bored at school, honestly, because it's like I'm so passionate about this thing, but I have to do all of these other things that I don't really like, uh, which are random classes that are forced by the university. But then you still have a little bit of freedom to choose like which classes you want, right? So I took some classes in photography, marketing, and other stuff. But yeah, like I'm not really a good programmer or software engineer, but I did love user experience and design. So, and because of my efforts, I was invited to apply to Caliber. So Caliber back then, even when I was a student, I always saw it as a great place to work at, even though I didn't intern there, right? Um, some of the signals I considered was that a lot of the talented people I looked up to actually work there. And it's an essential habit to have to just look out for where the talented people work at, because you're more likely to improve your skills, your own mental models of things, and how you experience the world when you're around with smarter people. And so I was lucky enough to just get invited to apply. And then I did. Um, and I got in as a mid-level designer because I would think I was an outlier, honestly, in terms of skills and experience. Because I had a ton of experience already. Like as a student, I was doing everything. Like I was leading a club. I was doing side projects. I was also freelancing as part of our student services, and those kinds of things. So I do have, I think, some coworkers from Caliber here. I don't know if Liz is still here, but shout out to Liz. um, so the essential thing I think for being a professional, so me thinking of myself as a UX designer or product designer, is that you have to build leverage. Leverage is creating an unfair advantage. Like there are many ways to do that, and I'll show you some things that I did. So one of the things that I experienced, and I tell this a lot, is when I attended those professional meetups, sort of things like this, right? Like you're listening to me right now. Like before I would attend the on-site events, I would look out for those designers that are actually what I thought were exceptional, and um, I wanted to create a platform that makes it that I can speak regularly to them, and it's advantageous not just to me but them, like for them as well. So because people want to work on their personal brands or like tell their stories and those kinds of things, people don't really think about it, like because they have other things to do, I guess. So I actually created the podcast called Roots, where I profile Filipino designers. And this gave me access to Filipino designers from everywhere, like any company you can think of. Like okay, if you want to hear someone who's a Philippine designer from Netflix or Apple or Meta, it just expanded my worldview. It's like the issue with like staying, uh, let's say in the Philippines, or like it's not just geographically, it's more of the mindset. Like if you don't escape the mindset of the local scene and you don't recognize that you're in a global economy, that's kind of like a disadvantage to you. Because like you're better off, like what I said earlier, like surrounding yourself with people smarter than you. So I think I produced like 95 episodes of this, and you can assume that the episodes are like an hour and a half long each. So I was like, kind of, it's kind of like cheating. It's like a cheat, like you have access to these people. What do you ask? So like, hey, you did this. Like, why did you do that? Or how did you approach this? Those kinds of questions. And these interviews really hone my way of thinking across different areas, whether it's just being a UX designer or how to approach my career or trying to understand what other people value in their lives, what gives them happiness, those kinds of things. Yeah, so I also partnered up with Christian CSJ. If you know him, he's he started a lot of agencies in the Philippines, and he became product designer. He was my first internship boss, and like my first day, he said my work was shit. um, and I still stayed and like made sure I learned a lot. So I basically I climbed my way up to the point that he wanted to partner up with me and build something together. So that's the UX Plus conference. Um, so all of the things that I've done as a student, like they weren't really in vain, because you were I was kind of like building unique access to people, networks. I also built a skill of curation. Like I know what a quality designer is supposed to be like behaviorally, and how they think, and how they approach the world. That's a skill that I've built just because of the stuff I do. So that's my leverage, right? So that's not the only way to do things. There are other forms of leverage, but that was mine. Um, and we continue to, it's a self-compounding thing. Um, Along with my work at Caliber. So talking about Caliber, I was part of a design team, and at some point I led the design team as well. So we were doing user experience. This is where I was really exposed to like the realities of like what does a designer really do? Because if you learn it from just randomly online on YouTube University or some random influencer, like it's really hard. That's like you can't get in without someone really teaching you one to one. It's that hard. And then when I got in, I was like, oh my god, it really is super hard. Because like at Caliber, so it was a marketplace for employers and job seekers. I was part of the enterprise squad. So the company made money was that we had this system. We had an applicant tracking system. We also help people hire people, um, and then we had different deals and stuff. So it was the first time that I was asked to like come up with a strategy. Like what? Why am I given this much power? Like as a designer, typically designers like to navel gaze. They like want to do the craft. They want to fix the padding, fix the typeface. That's it. The colors. But then I was like, okay, how do we attack this market? Why? What do we build first? What do we prioritize? And then you're going to be surrounded by different kinds of um, factors that affect the context. So decisions aren't made in a vacuum. That's what happens when you're doing like a side project for yourself as a designer. Like you randomly come up with a project and then you do it, right? But then in a digital product situation, you're like, okay, what metrics to um, act on? Why are those the metrics in the first place? Um, like how do you work with the other teams, especially the engineering team, the product managers, and even the sales team, the customer support team. Those things all factor in. um, so what did I do during this time? I built solid relationships with my coworkers. We did still attend like conferences to understand how the region thinks about design. um, and yeah, uh, back then, Liz is here. She's attending. Lizette, she's the one here at the center. There. um, I think for Caliber, I was exposed to what product thinking really was. Like, how do you plan a product? Like, why does it make sense to solve it in this way? um, and what systems are in place to make this happen, and so you can achieve your business goals, those kinds of things. And then on top of that, um, working with other people, and not just that, one more essential thing I see, no I that I think is essential, is how do you contribute to your company's culture. So for me, what I did was, I introduced the team to a lot of people that were potentially value adding. So I had this connection at Agoda. So when we were there, I was also spreading the employer brand of Caliber. So that's kind of like thinking, hey, like how do you market your team? Like why would other people join you in the first place? Because like when joining a company, like companies like to think that it's just one way. Like, hey, we're hiring, right? But you need to demonstrate your value as a team so you can attract the best talent. Like, why should we join you, right? Those kinds of things. So that was my value. And so how do you actually do that? Like, so that involves a lot of things like this, speaking, just being public about what you're doing and sharing what you're learning in your journey with people, and continue to give value in different ways. So I like to do I like to give value in ways that scale and don't scale. So the things that scale are things like content, like um roots as podcast episodes, because like you can produce it once. Like I'll take 8 hours to do one episode, but then people can still listen to the podcast until now, right? um but there are things that don't really scale. Like you do events like this, go to go back to school and like share what you're learning to the students. It might not have an immediate effect right away, but you're building relationships that really matter in the long run, those kinds of things. So I also contributed to still UX Philippines. At this time, I was doing a UX research talk, and I became a YouTuber. So don't follow my channel. um, what's interesting here is that I'm kind of like forcing myself in uh, uncomfortable situations, um, and facing it head on. Like, okay, how do you even do a YouTube channel? I really love learning. right? It doesn't matter what it is. Like even if it's doing the thumbnail for the YouTube video or something very technical, um everything can be learned. It's just a matter of your mindset approaching it, right? So yeah, this is Roots. And then I think me becoming a co-founder is just a net result of all of the things I've been doing, because I had never really set out to start Swarm, for example, or a company, but I have been demonstrating qualities that make for a good entrepreneur. So those kinds of things, people notice that. So the feedback I've been getting is that, hey, I'm good at building community. Um, I've demonstrably like started like one of the biggest UX conferences in Asia, or I'm good at spotting talent. On top of that, I have other skills, like I'm good at marketing, um, building product, having a high quality of taste when it comes to building user interfaces and visual design. So those kinds of skills, they stack up, and people will see that. And if they like that, and that's compatible with what they want to build, and you want to commit yourself to being a startup founder, then it's possible to actually build a startup. So if there are people here who want to build a startup, um, my recommendation is don't. um, well, do it if you're super serious about the problems you're solving. So, and you like if you have fun doing startups based on previous experiences. So, uh, but I would generally say don't do it, like, because it's really really hard. Um, so like less than 10% of startups survive. Maybe like less than 5%. Sorry. Um, but then this is when I recognized all of the stuff I've been doing. Like it is valuable, but it's not enough. So there are things that worked for us, like um as a startup, like I was good at marketing design, all of the content stuff, and even just doing the actual product design. But then you're accountable to your partners, especially if you're not doing it solo. Doing it solo is like extremely extremely hard. So in this picture, you can see my co-founders and our chairman. So Aaron's there. Um, he's our CTO. Sabrina's there. She's like our head of product. Dexter is our CEO, and it's his second time building a startup. And I think I was just really lucky, honestly, to that he wanted to partner up with me and Aaron, and we onboarded Sabrina later on. And we're a mission-driven startup, primarily because of Dexter and Manny. Manny Ayala is the person on the last row. Sorry, I'm the last person in this row. So what's essential in finding partners for startups is you fill in the gaps for one another. Second, you need to have demonstrated kind of like work experience, or in other words, trust. Because like we all worked before together at Caliber. So Aaron and Dexter and I, when we started Swarm, and then we onboarded Sabrina. Sabrina's from Slack. Uh, so she left Slack to do her own startup, and then she joined Swarm. And then Manny is like one of the earliest like investors in startups in the Philippines. Like he's on the board of Raptor, if I'm not mistaken. So the key thing with startups is everything changes every day. uh, Everything is very uncertain. And because I was a designer and I, for my work experience, didn't really like structure in the form of corporations, right? I almost always probably started things by myself or joined a smaller company. Like it was a perfect fit, in my opinion, because I had a bias for action. And um, essentially, as a startup co founder, what really makes a difference is the relationships you've built in the past. So imagine I was contributing back to like UX Society, right? Like who knew I would hire people from there? Like was literally not thinking of that when I started the club, right? But that became a talent pool for Swarm. Um, and also some folks at Caliber joined us just because of the people that were part of the company. And what's more complex as a startup co-founder is if you're thinking about doing it is you're not just responsible for craft. Like I don't even do like the UI designs anymore. Like I'm part of like investor meetings, um, maybe sometimes design reviews, but primarily being accountable to business metrics like okay, how much revenue have we created or have we acquired for the month? How many users and how many of those become customers? Um, how many people are seeing our content? Uh, how much of them really engage? Those kinds of things. And whoever the co-founders are, like whatever their values are, that's the culture of the startup. So like um it's like at the start of Swarm, we've written down what we value as co-founders. So we love obsessing over the problem. We focus on the problem because typically as startup people or people who want to pitch startups, they're like, "Oh, I have an idea for XYZ." Like ideas are kind of like they're worthless until like you've earned money from your idea. That's what I learned um, from doing Swarm and just being around phenomenal people. Um, and in terms of culture, one thing that emanates from me, because this is something I actually do believe in, is we obsess over the craft. So like it's rare to be a design co-founder because people don't really see our value, right? Because like if you're a designer, like what are you doing? You're just making UI designs, and then that's it. Uh, but we have phenomenal strengths in a startup environment. Um, in terms of craft, to us, that's like creating content, creating UI that becomes an asset um, that makes people trust us more because it's nicely designed, right? Um, Other things that are valuable are designer skills to prototype. So if you're good at prototyping, that's super helpful in a startup environment because if you don't have product market fit yet, or um like you don't have enough, let's say, profits to like keep going or whatever. The designer's skill is in creating concepts, experimentation, and like shipping those prototypes and like exposing those prototypes to users and learning from that. That's the biggest value you can possibly have, like as a designer. And understanding it, with the intricacies of user research, like how do you know if you're kind of biased when you're showing a prototype to someone. Those kinds of things matter. I find as a design co-founder, it was also helpful that I trained myself in communicating with other people and also managing other people. So some of the people here are my direct reports. Hi, everyone. um, but then essentially, people won't join your startup if like you're useless as a co-founder or a hiring manager. Because like what I've said as a student earlier, right? Like people join companies because of the people. So if you're not creating pathways for career growth, then they won't join. Or typically startups are seen as a risk. Like why would you join one? Uh, the potential risks are that the company will eventually die, or you don't have much salary compared to other companies that are already profitable, um, or that you're not given enough equity. So like if the startup does become successful, that's the pathway to real wealth. Then you get a piece of the pie, of course, and you co-own the company, right? Um, so like really building up your skills, being a trustworthy person, to work under, and fostering that kind of idea. You want to make sure that people you hire eventually contribute to the culture as well, like stuff that I've been talking about earlier during my stay at Caliber, right? Um, yeah, and what's the issue with like startup life is everything is in flux. Like you don't really know what's gonna happen. Like today the strategy may change, tomorrow something else. Um, and it's highly susceptible to um, changes in the market, customers' perception, how your team is, comprised of, what your team is comprised of, what are your resources. So it's like you only have a limited amount of time and money to make your moves. So what are the plays that you're going to make, right? So what kind of play are we doing right now? That's like, how do you answer that, right? But if you're not a co-founder, like you don't need to think about that. You just like need to do the designs. That's it. Um, so there's 10 minutes left, I guess, for my talk, but I'll take a lot of questions. So what's important at Swarm is, for myself, what's been helpful is being open to feedback. So this Sabrina, I love Sabrina because she has so much experience. Like she's like one of the top salespersons in Slack, and she just brings a wealth of experience for us at Swarm. So that sharpens my mental model. Like when it comes to sales, Dexter's there. He's funny sometimes, so that enhances my being funny skills. Everyone else is really, really good at what they do. Um, and because of the culture, that we've been building, like we attract a lot of really talented people too. And I was talking about leverage early on. So if you think about it, my unfair advantages are creating design community, um, having domain expertise in hiring and employer branding, and working on an HR technology product. Um, what else? What else are my advantages? I can create content, right? I like starting things from scratch, and those kinds of things all boil down to whatever we're doing now, right? So we have events, um, like this, and yeah. So I think being a co-founder, it's really open-ended. But if you like perennial, never-ending flux in your life, like, and you enjoy that, and you have nothing to lose, and that was my case. I really had nothing to lose, honestly. Might as well do it. Then the benefits that you gain are number one, like accelerated learning, because so much there's a lot at stake. Like if you're a startup founder, like how do you even pay your employees, or like how long is the startup gonna survive, and like what moves are you gonna do so that you can make it out alive, or like how do you innovate so that your customers love you and your users love you and your community loves you and your product, um and like how do you keep the people in the company happy and make sure that they're growing, and like how do you make sure as a co-founder you're readapting yourself to roles that you haven't done before, because I'm literally a designer, but now I'm like a fully fledged like growth person, and like I didn't even know that role existed before. um so now I'm becoming like a growth product designer hybrid person, where because of the skills I have, uh I can help create a product that markets itself and create loops within the product. That my skills like boil down to those what do you call this, advantages now. That's how I view myself. But then it's a never ending story, honestly, as a co-founder. And if you need help in deciding what your next steps are, just don't ask, joke. You can chat any of us, and I'm very willing, because a part of my journey as well is just coaching people. I think a lot of these things they can't be learned at a boot camp or just YouTube. It's essential that you speak with someone like one on one, because your context changes all the time. So like people don't really know what you're going through, and in order to give specialized unique suggestions to your case, you need someone helping you out. And that's what our community is about. Like that Swarm is all about that, helping one another, because especially in the fractional space, it's kind of lonely being a freelancer or a fractional worker. You don't know if you're even if let's say you're an established software engineer or designer, at a whatever Y Combinator startup, and then you suddenly want to do side projects or go at it yourself alone. Like, okay, how do you handle the finances, the invoicing, the administrative stuff, your benefits, your pipeline of clients, those kinds of things? Those are problems that we're interested in solving. And if you want to work on those kinds of things, let us know. I have, before we take questions, random video from our CEO. Give me a sec. Okay, so this is his message to all of you. Thank you for listening.
Thanks for attending our event. At Swarm, we help startups and founders like you connect with the best fractional talent to help them build and move fast. 80% of the talent connected through Swarm have worked at a YC company, Fortune 500 company, or a FANG company. You can have access to this too. Visit swarm.work/hire. Get started now.